I see trees of green.
My name's Hayden. I am the manager of Series Fairwood. Just before I get started, a bit about me. I'm not traditionally from timber as a background. I've gone through a number of different iterations of careers and was stuck in a really terrible office job, and I was like, what's the complete opposite of that? And I got a job at a timber yard and just loved it. Started making furniture and just couldn't ask enough questions about timber and learn, and I'm still doing that. I'm finding the longer I'm in it, the more I realise I need to learn, and it's a pleasure. It's an absolutely amazing material to be surrounded by day to day. I come home smelling like mostly Macrocarpa cypress, but it's a wonderful place to be. And now I get the privilege of being, running a timber yard for a fantastic organisation called Ceres, which I'll get to in just a sec. So a bit of an overview on what I would like to talk to you about today. One, about Ceres, the parent organisation that Fairwood is part of, about who Fairwood is and what we do, our ethos and goals, why we're here, essentially, what kind of things that we do, stock, services, things like that. I think there's a bit of excitement around how we price timber, which I'll go into as much detail as I can, and I imagine there'll be a few questions there, which I'll see how well I can go with those. The supply chain, the things that we look for, the challenges that we come across, and I guess, what I would hope to see in the future. And then there's a bit of information about where you can read more or come and visit us and learn more about what we do. And then questions. But I actually like to say that because I'm very timber-centric, my whole world is around the finished product and the process to get to that. I might drop some terminology that I know is, like, it's my language, my day-to-day, and if it's a term that you've not come across, just yell out and I'll explain. I want to be as inclusive as possible. I think that's got me covered. So let's talk about Ceres. I would also like, if you've got a question that's pertinent to what we're talking about right then, I feel like it's okay that you just check in and we'll have a quick chat. Let's be flexible about it. So Ceres started in 1982. It was an old quarry for bluestone in Brunswick, and then turned into a tip for household waste like washers, dryers, old furniture, stuff like that. And it was a bit of an eyesore. Then there was a group of people doing the Work for the Dole program, and they saw this amazing opportunity for land so close to the city and surrounded by lots of houses and people. And they wanted to turn it into a productive space, so they planted it out as like a community garden and capped it off, and now it's, I wish I had a photo of it, but right now you'd never know that you were sitting on top of a tip, and I've heard that in some places it's centimetres from a washer or dryer. It's just amazing what you're looking at and what it used to be. So Ceres as an organisation is quite big now. I've heard that it's growing, approximately 18 enterprises under Ceres, and each of those has their own goals and their own purpose. The main purpose of Ceres is to promote people falling in love with the earth again. And they do education programs, they get school groups of kids in to teach them about environmental principles and how to live more sustainably. It's also a registered charity, so all of the sub-enterprises that are underneath Ceres make money to then feed back to Ceres to promote their education programs. So we are technically for profit, but the profit goes to the parent organisation, Ceres. We get a lot of people coming through. It's a bit of a social spot. People during lockdowns would go there and hang out because it was outdoors and it was a beautiful place to be. There's quite a lot to see. So if you're ever in Brunswick, definitely worth a look. The place is just beautiful. There's a cafe, a grocer, there's market gardens there. So some of the other enterprises that are alongside what I do, there's Ceres Fair Food, and they do organic food boxes that they make up and deliver to residents around the area using organically organic grown vegetables and all sourced from mainly Victoria, I'm pretty sure. There is an actual market garden in Coburg and lots of other things. I could go on for a while about that, but I don't think that's why we're here. So yeah, there's a lot of really great things happening in the series, and I'm part of that now, which feels really great. So us, Fair Wood, started in about 2017. It was a bit of just a loose idea from an architect called Paul Ha. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Paul Ha. He is kind of our guru for timber use in construction. I go to him quite regularly with questions about timber and how appropriate it is for certain types of building jobs. He was actually one of the founding members of Series in 1982, so he's been involved for a very long time. He came to my director, Chris, and said, why aren't we selling timber? There are so many people locally growing fantastic timber that can't connect what they do to the market. People are stuck going to Bunnings or Home Hardware or whatever it is, and there's 2 or 3 options on the shelf and it doesn't support local industry. Why don't we connect those dots? Chris thought it was a great idea, and we got a couple of packs in, and it started out with not a lot. There might have been just a couple of packs, a couple of cubic meters, and what it is now, there's a photo later on you can see from our warehouse. It's 100 times as much timber, I think, something like that. It's a lot. The stock that we get is coming from lots of different sources, but we like to ask a lot of questions. So our favourite are agroforesters and farm foresters. We also deal in salvage, so if trees need to come out for or get knocked down because they're a safety concern, if they're doing roadworks, things like that, where the timber would traditionally get mulched and turn into a waste product, we put our hands up and say, can we do something better with that and salvage from that waste? We have dealt a little bit in recycled timber. I think it's a fantastic idea, but it's not what we're trying to promote. We're trying to promote people planting more trees. Recycled timber is a finite resource. It'll just eventually run out, and if we're not planting trees, then where are we going to be at in the next 10, 20 years? So, playing the long game. We're really well located. We're just in the north of the city. My previous job was at another timber yard, and that was in Spotswood, just over the Westgate Bridge. We had a lot of makers around there, but they were all travelling from the inner north. So now we're right in the heart of it. So we've got a lot of people that just even walk to our warehouse from their little factory, which is around the corner, to get timber. We've also got a lot of building going on in the inner north, and there's a really good demand for sustainable timber there. So I feel like it's an emerging market. I feel it is, and it's only going to keep growing. The more that people talk about sustainable timber, and hey, like this table was made out of a tree that John felled because he planted it 20 years ago, 30 years ago. That connection from sitting around this beautiful table, all the people are like fawning over it, and then the person that owns that table can say, well, actually, the place that I got it from knew who grew the tree, who cut it down, who milled the timber. It went to this place and got processed. All of these connections, we kind of keep tabs on. And I've found from my previous job to now, the difference in what we can provide our customers as far as the provenance of the timber really has an emotional connection for people. And it's a really easy conversion to make. Like they can go to Bunnings and get Tassie oak coming from who knows where, and it looks beautiful, but having that story behind it makes a huge difference. And I've not heard a single person come in the door that wasn't happy to hear that they could be told the provenance. They're all very happy with that. But maybe that's just the market that we get because we're attached to Series, and it's a bit of a left-leaning organisation. So we supply mainly locally. Lots of people around Melbourne. We do send stuff out to regional areas, not as often, and we have sent a pack of timber to Perth, which I was really surprised with. They loved what we were doing and wanted to support the organisation. They bought a packet of timber for garden beds. And I'm sure they could have got stuff locally, but they were happy to support us and put it on a truck, and the freight cost more than the timber. Good on them, is all I can say. Not all of us are in a position to be able to do that, and I'm very grateful. said before, all of our profits feed back to series for the education programs. So our ethos, we've got a criteria for how we select our timber. It's on our website. It's very accessible. People, if they want to know more about where their timber's coming from and the guidelines that we use to supply, it's there, it's clear, it's transparent. And that's kind of that's one of our main things is transparency. So the big one, and this was coming from Paul Ha, farm forestry, agroforestry, and trees from other mixed land use. So trying to support people growing more timber, more trees. Salvage is great, saves on wastage, but it doesn't really promote planting more trees. So we'll keep coming back to that top point. The third, contentious, Australian native forests, maybe in the future. It's very emotive. People don't, well, I found from my customer base and people that deal in forestry management of native forests will have a different opinion. There is a disconnect. They don't understand the processes. It can be done really well. I've heard we've got some fantastic ecologists working with us, and they'll go out and assess sites and say, yes, what they're doing here is fantastic and this is why. We've heard stories of cowboys that go and just take whatever they want and to hell with the consequences. And we don't want to be part of that. I'm open to Australian native forestry timber if I can prove that it is done really well. And I'll need that full chain of custody. I'll need to know all the steps. Kind of like our own FSC certification scheme, if you're familiar with Forestry Stewardship Council. Yep. So we don't, like, I'm sure the question will come up later, we're not part of FSC because we do our own assessing and we do the legwork, we go for drives and we engage ecologists. It may be something that we come to in the future. I don't know a whole lot about it. I've heard that it's not as great for smaller operators. It becomes too expensive, but then I've also heard there's group certification schemes which you can include your neighbours. And so I'm open to it, but I want to know more. Yeah, you can find out a lot more about us at our website, which is there. I'm also going to send this back to Rita. I will send you this presentation, which will have all the links, and then if you want, you can send it around and people can look at them later. Separate to our ethos, we are trying to grow what we do. We started with a couple of packs of timber, very simple, but the more time and energy we put into this, the more people come in and say, I want this, I want this, I want this kind of thing for this project. And trying to keep up with that demand is a stretch, but it is something that we can do over time. In the last 2 years, the amount of timber that's come in and gone out is pretty phenomenal. Even during COVID, I'm quite surprised and very lucky to be able to still have worked during all of those lockdowns. But even during that time, we've expanded our range quite significantly. And now we get all kinds of people coming in for different things like furniture, flooring, building materials, firewood even, landscaping gear, all kinds of stuff. One benefit, I'd like to say, it's kind of off this, but one benefit of knowing the people that are doing the timber machining or milling is people can come to us with an odd inquiry and say, I want this, but it's kind of not your typical size piece of wood. The dimensions are not a standard. Can you help? And I would just call the miller, and because it's a guy that just works down the road, and we can talk about it, and the customer ends up with something that is more in line with what they want, and they don't have to compromise. And I feel like that gives opportunity for work to be given to more locals instead of sent off to Bunnings and that kind of stuff, where they end up with something that they don't actually want. I'm hoping to increase our supplier and customer base. So what we do, we're trying to engage people like yourselves in the future. I'm not sure where you're all at your growing processes, but it takes a long time to grow trees, so we might be talking about 20, 30 years in the future. But I'm still keen to hear from you, and if you've got timber, if you've got logs that you're wanting to harvest, then let us know, and I want to network and get to know you all. And yeah, the customer base, obviously we would like to increase that as well, so we can keep growing and keep buying more timber, and the whole process becomes more and more, I'm not going to say financially viable, because that's the whole reason we're there. But it's it starts becoming a real thing in the timber industry, is that people know that there are better options available. There are still a number of, I've heard a lot of talk when people come in, and builders especially, they are not used to using sustainable timber, but the client that they're working for, the end user, has said, I need you to use sustainable timber. I've heard these guys do really great stuff, like us or a recycled timber yard. Don't get your timber from here or here. So there is a demand, and it's changing, and it's heading in the right direction. But we want to be able to support it into the future. As it grows, we need to be there with it as it's growing. So having more suppliers, a greater reach for sustainable timber, it's the only way that we can keep up with that. Part of that is going to then support the growth of farm forestry. So as we start looking for more and more sustainable timber, I'm going to start looking for more and more logs. And I hope that we grow and outgrow our current factory. We started with a corner of a warehouse, and you'd fit it twice in here. We had a forklift, a couple of packs of timber. We were sharing the space with Series Fair Food. They were growing. The time that I came onto the organisation was the very start of COVID. As soon as the first lockdown hit, Series Fair Food quadrupled overnight in their... sorry, was there a question? Oh, no. They quadrupled overnight in what they could do. So I couldn't get on the forklift and start working with timber until 4 p.m. that day. So it's just, I can't run a business like that. So we started looking for a new place. We went from having something that is, 100 square metres, we ended up with something that's, I think, 1,600 square metres now. And it's filled already. Sorry, excuse me. And that was mid-2020. We moved into the new warehouse. And yeah, so we've been able to grow quite quickly into all these different markets. And it's really encouraging, and I can only see it continuing to go in that direction. There is talk. I don't know how much I'm allowed to talk about it, but my director is showing interest in setting up an urban sawmill to deal with, you would have known all the storms that happened mid-last year. A lot of trees came down. One of the portable sawmillers that we use calls it now a horizontal forest. There's a lot of, this kind of caused a bit of talk around, well, there's a lot of this happening, why aren't we salvaging more timber? So in Melbourne CBD, the region in the city, apparently there's like 1,000 usable logs coming down every year that are getting mulched. If we set up a portable, like an urban sawmill, we can then take those and turn them into something else, and then feed that money back into series, and then keep the snowball rolling. So yeah, growth. It's bound to happen. We've got a lot of space in our warehouse which is kind of dedicated to processing the timber. So drying, sticking out. We've got a kiln in there now. We do a bit of selecting and sorting and stuff like that. And that could then be sent off-site to the sawmill, and then our shop becomes just an end point for sellable timber. So people come in, anything that's there they can walk away with. So yeah, a lot of room to grow. Inspiring builders and architects and end users to do more with sustainable timber. I feel like a lot of that's coming from the end user, from the person that is having the work done on their house. But I guess if we market ourselves as a viable option, like we're competitive financially, but we've also got all these extra steps. We can tell you about who grew the tree, where it got cut up, all these extra steps where other places they go to, they can't get that. And I feel like that's only increasing every day. I'm getting more and more inquiries for this sort of stuff. I can see it happening now. And we're still very young. Like if we started in 2017 and we're able to have such growth in, 5 years, and we've only just got our own warehouse, it's really encouraging to me to know that that's the way we're going. And then we want to tell positive stories about what people do with the timber. So anytime timber goes out, I ask for photos back, and then that goes back into our marketing. Excuse me. And then that is part of the snowball. It will keep going, and people will see what the timber can be used on. And I brought some samples along today, and I can show you things that have come from farm and forestry that are now getting used in architect design builds, and it's getting a lot of momentum behind it. So I know that there is a market for what you're doing. We just need to harness it and keep that energy going. So I talked about Paul Haar earlier. Started small, outgrew our own space. I should have said all of this now anyway. But I did a quick walk around yesterday of how many cubic meters I think I've got in at the moment, which 100 cubic meters, if that metric means anything to you, takes up a bit of space. I still see that as nowhere near enough. But compared to the 3 cubic meters or so that we started with, it's a big jump. So still looking, still wanting to get much more timber. The things that we do, we sell timber for all kinds of purposes, as you can read it there. But we also have services that we do alongside our business, which is we've got a carpentry arm to our business. There's an in-house carpenter, and they do contract work and carpentry for people in the inner north, and that's been growing quite rapidly in the last 6 months. We also do just like add-on things, which maybe not relevant to you, but just so you're aware, oils, finishes, cutting boards, and we've just got a whole box of Ronan Reed's books, so that's really great. Selling his stuff. We went out and did a tour last week, which very inspiring place to be. Our current range, there's some species, Macrocarpa, southern blue gum, sugar gum, shining, blackwood spotted, messmate, maddergum, ash, and other odds and sods. A bunch of the odds and sods have come from John. We've got a few really exciting ones that I didn't even realise were on the market. Things like, I imagine you'll get the tour and see the trees, but we've got Lusitanica, like Mexican pine. We've got American tulip wood, which still blows my mind that we can be growing that, and it's fantastic. But we get really interesting, unique timbers that you don't see at other timber yards because it's not scalable at a level that works with them. They can't send a semi-trailer load off to get done. Where we can talk about one tree that fell over in someone's yard, or it was grown as a garden tree or something like that. So we ended up with, on the side here, there's a whole bunch of English elm, not grown, not a native species, but it was grown here, and it was salvaged from some property work happening on a farm out in Gippsland. I could talk all day about the different species and where it comes from, but I don't know that that's why you're here. But if we look at southern blue gum, shining gum, blackwood, spotted gum, messmate, ash, these are very sought after timbers, and they're all coming from this part of Victoria. A lot of those are growing here, John, and have taken them off your hands. So there's a lot of really sought after timber that comes through agroforestry. I don't know about sugar gum. I think that's more in more arid areas, so central and western Victoria. But we are, I'm not sure what the viability on such a slow growing timber is for agroforestry, but I think it's still a fantastic tree to grow, and I'll be definitely planting a lot of those myself when I come and do your course. These are the sorts of things that I get sent back from customers that are using the timber. So the one in the middle is that English elm from the farm cleared property. Macrocarpa cypress, which is farm edging trees as windbreaks, salvage material there. And the one on the bottom left, same species. This is a sugar gum bench made up. It's just an absolutely beautiful timber. One of the most hard wearing timbers I've come across yet. And grown in Victoria. And the top right, is a centipede, a giant centipede that is installed as a playground at Ceres. The whole body of it is made out of salvaged macrocarp as well. Got some more similar species there. The one that I brought samples along. The one that I was most excited to talk to you about was the southern blue gum, because I know it's a great timber to grow in farm forestry because it's so versatile and it grows quickly. We've been using that for structural and cladding timber and the momentum on that one's really picking up. The one that I am excited about, I think, is in your hand, the southern blue gum. So that is from an agroforestry plantation in Gippsland. It was planted, I think it was 25 or 30 years ago, and they're now harvesting. And so this is all within one person's career timeline. They planted it and they're now harvesting it. And so it's Frank and Sharon Hurst, if you're familiar. That's Blackwood. The southern blue gum, it's a really versatile timber. The reason I'm so excited about that one is because I know the plant, I know where it's come from. It then got sent to Dan Bright in Amber Creek Sawmilling and Farm. He's in Fish Creek, so it's just down the road, and then it comes to us. So that chain is really small. And all the architects that come in, all the builders and end users, they just love it. We've got a couple of displays at work, and people have fallen over it. And they're typically coming to us saying, "Oh, I've heard that I can only get something like what's one of them? Silver top ash. That's a big name in cladding or blackbutt. Is there a more sustainable option, or is there something that is a little bit left centre?" And then I can show them this. It looks quite similar. It's still very durable. It's good for bushfire rated areas to a degree. And the pricing, it's pretty comparable. So it's another option, and it supports an area that needs to have more growth. So now the bit that I heard is what you would more be interested in, how we price timber, and then I guess how that trickles down to the grower. There's a lot of processes that go into selling a product like what you're handling now. It's gone through, it's been grown, it's been felled. So there's lots of different processes that go into producing a sellable piece of timber, like what you're seeing in your hands. The logistics of getting the trees to a place where they can be milled is quite difficult. You've got to think about the log trucks and I don't know what you call them, but they've got the arm on the back of the truck to actually pick them up and put them on a truck. Getting them to a mill, if that's the process that you wanted to go through, because there is also the option of having a portable sawmiller come and do it on site, you may or may not be set up for that or have the space or the type of land that works for that. It then needs to get dried if it's for this kind of use. We don't really bother with things like landscaping timber, or sometimes we get some wacky builders that like to do it, like have framing from like the 1970s back, where it was all just installed green and seasoned inside the homes. It doesn't really happen anymore, but there's still a few people that do it. We can do that as well. The drying is it's its own trade as far as I'm concerned. It's a science. I've heard from Rowan Reed that he's been learning about it for years, and he's still learning about it every day, and I concur. I'm trying to learn about it, and it fries my brain. You can air dry for a while, you can then put it through a kiln and different temperatures of the kiln. The more processes and the more difficult each of these are, the more expensive the end product is. These are all the things I have to account for when I sell a piece of timber. But then I've also got a big shed to pay for. I've got staff. We started with just me doing part-time, and now there's 5 people employed, mostly full-time, and there's a carpentry division as well. So these have all got to get paid for. What I'm getting to is, there's lots of, this is how I price timber to sell it. Typically we go to a miller to buy our timber. It's not saying that this is the only way that we can do it, but when we purchase timber, it's easier for us at the moment to go to a sawmiller, maybe the one that's set up as like a static sawmill, and they would then they would source the logs so that they would go, I hope, to the agroforestry groups and say, these are the things I'm looking for. They might know some of your names and call you directly. There is a customer, me, who is looking for this. Have you got logs that we could then buy off you and turn into this end product for them? I'm not so familiar with that end backwards. I can only really talk about when I'm dealing with a miller directly, because I'm familiar with that process. But what they do behind that is something I'd like to learn more about. An example of that is the southern blue gum. We go to Dan Bright at Amber Creek Sawmill and Farm, and we've got a contract with Dan where we've bought what I think is quite a large amount of this material ahead of time. So then he's got the money to take it to the grower and pay for their logs for, I think it's 2 years worth of harvesting. So there's money already in the system. He does the comms and the negotiation between himself and the grower. I'm not as familiar with what happens between the two of them, but we end up dealing with the sawmiller and get this amazing end result. I hope you're going to have some questions about that. I don't know that I'm going to be able to answer all of them, but I will go back and try, and I'll send emails to you with answers. Yes?
Well, if somebody has a portable timber mill and is milling wood products on their site and is also able to dry them properly, is there a way to just approach you, or just to send you a catalogue of what is being produced so that you know and keep us in mind?
That would be my ideal, I think. If people came to me,
cut out the middleman.
Exactly,
basically.
and if you can say these are the things that are coming up, these are the logs that I've got. Even if you've just got the log, you could then ask me what I want to get out of that log, and you can plan, and we end up with something that's really efficient. I don't want to see timber getting wasted, so I'm often buying the fall down as well. We talked about sawmilling. Is that part of the course up to this point? So fall down sizes, I'm often planning for that as well, so you've got an outlet for that as well. You don't end up with just a pile of firewood. The customer likes that as well. That's where I was getting to with the next point. So opportunity for you to value add. If you've got access to a portable sawmill, do it. Cut it up yourself. Stick it out to dry. There's a lot of learning to do there, but then you can do your own value adding, and then I can go direct to you instead of having to go through other sources, and that's more money for you.
I suppose people, a lot of people might be able to do that portable sawmilling and air drying. So is that an opportunity where you can do the kiln drying?
Yeah. So that happens a bit. We stick at the moment. We do a lot of sticking out to air dry, but we've got a little kiln as well, a solar powered one. So we can do that topping off. Where I was going with this is, I don't know how much you would get paid for logs. I guess that depends on the quality of the logs, the species, and a number of other factors. I could talk about what I currently pay for in green sawn material, but then you've got to also account for yield. Like, I've heard that if you get 30% yield from a log, that's pretty good. So the mathematics working back from your green sawn timber to the log, I guess it's not that complicated, but I would need a calculator. So is that of interest? Like,
tell us.
Pardon?
Tell us.
Yeah, so, okay, it depends on the species, for one. If it's blackwood or things of like higher retail furniture timber, they'll get more money. At the moment, and it'll change, and by the time you've got logs that are viable for saw logs, then it might be a completely different world. But currently, I pay for like landscaping cypress. You've seen some bits of macrocarpa floating around. Landscaping cypress that comes to me just green sawn, I'll be paying anywhere between $800 to $1,200 a cubic metre. Cubic metre makes sense to people? You understand that? Yeah. So, and then we talk about cladding grade and cover grade, things for more like furniture and high-end products. They'll get more money because there's more processes involved to get it to that. They're selecting out pieces.
Well, give us an example.
So,
what about the southern blue gum?
Southern blue gum, we pay for the finished product. I'm not part of the process to there, so I'm paying essentially a wholesale rate on the finished. I add a percentage and it goes straight back out the door. If we were buying that green sawn, I think it would be somewhere around it's a bit of a guess here, but it'd be between 1,500 to 2,000 a cubic metre green. We're buying at the moment some sugar gum, salvage sugar gum, which has been air dried for a few years, and we're paying 2,000 a cube for that.
Is that a stumpage rate or a?
That's like the process before buying, before I approach the miller that's done the work. What they've done behind that, I'm not aware of.
Mm.
So all I can talk about is what I know, and that is what I've paid to millers in the past. I'm hoping that cubic metre rate that they're getting covers all of that.
Mm.
I don't see why they would run their business to not cover that.
And what about shining gum?
Shining gum, we get, at the moment we're getting some kiln-dried shining gum out of Tassie, and we're paying anywhere between, it'd be skip dressed as well, sorted so all the sapwood's removed, so there's a few processes in there. We pay anywhere between 2,000 and 2,600 a cubic metre for that. If I can get the product in my door, put it straight back on the truck and get it machined, and then it comes back as a finished product, I'm happy to pay more. Because the less handling I do, the cheaper it is for me. That's a good one, yeah, shining gum, it's a fantastic timber, and yeah, I feel like that's getting some momentum behind it as well. There's some builders and furniture makers in town that are starting to use it a bit more. I see two here.
You've obviously got like a boutique product for your customers.
Yep.
Is there a high tolerance or appetite for feature timber, like seeing some of the examples, and you might see Bowen's or Bunnings?
Yeah, absolutely. Feature timber is it's on vogue. High gum vein timbers, stuff with character in it. People love it. Absolutely. It's pretty rare that people come into my shop asking for select grade or very clean timber. The samples that you're seeing might just be an off-cut that don't have that in it. I tried to include some, like this messmate here, for instance. That's like gold to customers.
Yeah.
If it doesn't have that, they're like, why don't I just buy Tassie Oak and pay half as much at Bunnings? But this is what really drives it. Any other? This is a bit of shining gum.
That's select grade.
Yeah. So that came off that was from a pack of run-of-mill lining boards. It just happened to be that the piece that I cut off didn't have any feature to it.
Right.
But this is shining gum as well, and you can see that there's pruned knots, there's lots of stuff going on in there, and customers are more than happy with it, as long as it holds together and doesn't fall apart from lictospora. I'm hoping you're going to talk about sapwood content and starch, the banes of my existence. It's a good one. I'm a little bit emotional about it at the moment because I'm packing a flooring order, and it is loaded with sapwood, so I've got the iodine out and I'm testing every board, and I wish I didn't have to do that. Sometimes you win, sometimes you don't.
Hayden. We've renovated an old farmhouse, so the wood we've taken off the house is 100 years old, and it's seen that yet. It's got some smells, and the builders just wanted a big bonfire, and I couldn't bear to get rid of it. So I'm just not sure about the reality of repurposing or something like that.
Yeah.
Yes, it's got the nails, but it's just amazing wood.
Yeah. There are places in Melbourne, there's Timber Zoo, there's Timber Revival, that process recycled structural timber. It is a fantastic material. I've used it a lot.
Waste, I think it's just not
It gets
not
crunched and
valued.
chucked in the tip,
Yeah.
and it doesn't need to be. There are easy ways to get the steel out of it. You can use metal detectors, you can use denailers, and then you might need to re-dry it, recondition and re-dry it, and then just have it.
Redry it.
Yeah, so if it's gone beyond a point of, like if it goes too low in moisture, you maybe want to reintroduce some and then dry it down to the perfect, so technical, the perfect moisture content for furniture, which is like between 8 and 14, somewhere in there, depends who you talk to. I absolutely agree with you. I think that that timber should be reused.
Not burn it.
Yeah,
Might be
Yes,
there forever, but anyway.
yeah.
Actually, hedger construction here in the district, they use that if the client wants it, and one of the houses that we had on the show and tell with the Climate Network down in Narberthon, they want a price and the entire house, structural and all, is all repurposed.
Maybe.
And it's a fantastic, it was a brilliant job after the bushfires. That family lost their house and they decided to go down that path.
And
So
we wanted to, but we're naive and we didn't research enough and we believed what we were
So some of the builders are actually quite keen to work that into their formula if the customer wants that.
I think one complication to using recycled hardwood as structural is you need to get a structural engineer who's willing to say, yes, this timber is suitable for that purpose. And I don't know how common they are. Maybe they're getting more common as that's becoming more in vogue. So there was a question back here. Yep.
We've recently cut down quite a lot of our Sydney blue gum that was only growing for about 14 years. And my husband's been chopping it into firewood because that seems to be most cost effective. Would that be really all you can do with it?
Well, it depends on what the logs look like, really. If it's got a straight barrel on it and you think it could turn into a sawlog log, then I don't see why it couldn't.
So we cut them down because they weren't doing as well as other species. But just, he said the time he'd need to spend milling it and...
Yeah, okay. How, do you have the, like a DBH on them?
I'm kind of messaging him at the moment. I don't know.
Diameter of breast
That's
height.
fine, I can see how much I know. What do you
Yeah.
reckon? You
Well,
guys saw them?
What class durability is Sydney blue gum? Does anybody know? Class 2?
Sydney blue gum would be class 2, I think,
Above or below ground?
or above ground.
Yeah.
I don't think it's durable in the ground.
Okay. So I think the next step after fire would be like farm fencing. But if it's not durable in the ground, then maybe not. I've heard of people using macacarpa in the ground as farm fencing though, and they just tar dip the bottom of it and it stops decay. I'm sure there's other things that could be done. It pains me to think that it just goes to that. But, you know, sometimes that's just the reality. If you've got somebody that you could put them up on online and say, look, these are logs, I don't have the heart to do this, to somebody would buy them, and maybe it's a love job and they turn it into saw logs for their own purposes. Maybe you just got to widen the net a little bit. Yeah, keep trying. I've got blue gum from you, John, and I think I've just sent it all off to get machined now, so I can't wait to see that. Yeah, it'll be good.
Just wondering, Hayden, if a client or a builder wanted a particular timber, a particular size, and you knew the bill and somebody that could supply that, would the client normally have to pay up front or pay a deposit on, so that you could get that in motion? They wouldn't just do that on the spec.
On spec, no, I think
You'd
it
have
should.
to put
If you went
something
to
down.
a standard timber yard, absolutely, you'd
Yeah.
almost, some of them would get you to pay the whole thing up front.
Okay, yeah.
I'm going to be a bit more flexible about it. If it's so crazy dimension that absolutely won't ever get sold, then I'll get a deposit.
Yeah.
But if it looks like something, like if it's, you know, a good size, it could be used structurally or something like that, and if the buyer backs out but I still think it's valuable, then, you know, I'll just put it up for sale.
Okay.
That's happened a few times and I've not been let down yet. I guess back to the sawmilling, I think there's merits and pros and cons for both. It's obviously going to be a lot more expensive to set up a static sawmill, but then if we've got a truck with the right capacity, we can go around and just pick up and go and find you and take the things that you've got ready. Maybe you've already cut them, end sealed them, keeping them under sprinklers so they're going to survive the wait between when you actually harvest them and when we can collect them. Yeah, and can then compare that to using a portable sawmill or setting up yourself. Like, why not explore it? If it's done well, there'll be a market for it.
A Lucas mill will cost you 15 grand.
Yep.
There's 3 blade size, 10, 8 and 6 inch. And if I was to advise, I'd go with the 8 inch blade size. I think it's the most versatile.
Can you get a 200mm cut out of an 8 inch?
You can, if you double back on it.
Right.
Yes.
Because that's a pretty good size for structural furniture and cladding.
Yes. Which is why it's, the 10 inch mill is, the 10 inch disc or blade is, yeah, you can get, we were getting 10 by 10, 6 metres long out of some of the wood cutting.
Yeah. But think
And,
about the types of timber that you're going to be growing well in farm forestry setups in this part of the country. You're going to have lower durability timbers like shining gum, southern blue gum, which make messmate ash, things that make beautiful timber for furniture, but maybe not for other things. So think about the end product and what you want to be able to sell and get the most money for, trying to meet that market. But yeah, I guess if it's 15 grand and you just change the blade over.
Oh, yeah, and that's the versatility of them. You can change the blade on.
Yeah, well, that's great. Was there anything else on? Yes.
Just, so you've obviously got requirements when the timber gets to you from the sawmill. What about when the trees are grown? I know you sort of said you don't have that much visibility over, that side of things, but is there any reason why, say we've grown a few hectares of spotted gum, we think we're ready to go, we've managed it well, it's good quality timber, we're ready to mill it. Is there any reason why Fairwood would then say, sorry, that's not something we're interested in terms of land management and, land use, like say we've...
Oh, like if it meets the criteria?
Yeah,
it was purpose planted, I imagine, so it was planted to be harvested. If that carbon has been drawn down and is locked up in the finished product of the timber, that's a net gain as far as I'm concerned. If you're then going to continue to grow more trees, then all the better. If you just went in, bought someone's agroforestry farm, leveled it, and tried to sell me the timber, I wouldn't be as happy about that. But still, I'm not going to dig myself a hole here, but those were planted for that purpose. So that carbon is still in the timber. It's to be assessed.
Sure. So is there sort of a written sort of set of requirements or criteria?
Yeah, it's on the website, and I'll get this presentation emailed around, and there's a link to our criteria. It's in the About Us section. It's pretty minimal because it's so varied from farm to farm and all the different things that people are doing. So we want to know about it. We'll ask you a lot of questions. We'll come out and look at it. We're nosy, and I think that's good.
There's actually a research paper from a guy, Dr. Fabiano Jimenez, who for a CRC carbon sequestration did an analysis of different wood products and their durability on average, like how long is that carbon actually locked in?
Yeah.
And that was very interesting
Well,
as well.
Is it like a couple of 100 years?
It confirms what you're saying.
Because it will eventually decompose, and that carbon will get released again. But we're giving ourselves a buffer, and if that continues, and people are doing farm forestry on a continual basis, that carbon's continuously going to be coming down, and it'll be cyclical, but hopefully in the right direction.
Yeah, I was just wondering, do you guys do any work with solutions? They do a lot of outreach that I think it's supposed to.
I use them a lot.
Yeah.
I use the website daily. I don't have any contact with them.
Okay, and then secondly, do you guys do your own outreach with regards to architects and designers?
Yeah. So the more we get in so far as like our capacity and the different products that we have, we'll start reaching out and telling people about it. It's pretty organic at the moment. Lots of people are talking to each other, but we're very happy for people to come and visit and see what we do. We'll give samples around, and we'll reach out more as we start getting better capacity. So when we talk about having 100 cubic meters on site, I want that to be 5 times that.
I'm just going to, I'm going to ask a third question. So, I mean, I guess the point I'm thinking is that if you're speaking with architects really early on, if they can have your products in mind and specified at the very earliest town planning phases, say, it means that by the time it actually comes to the builder getting in touch with you, stock is, you've got that lag, you're able to actually get the product in stock. Yeah.
The timeline on a tender, we're getting, again, a little bit off tangent, but I think it's important from project development through the tender process to actually getting it built. It can take a couple of years sometimes. If the trees aren't grown yet, we're talking about many years down the track, and then air drying. If we're talking about big section timber, if that's going to get dried properly, Rob Rule and Rowan Reid will tell you that it needs to be air dried for a certain amount of time. So we'll need it to stick out for a year, 2 years before it becomes usable. So there is that. For smaller dimension, like cladding, flooring, lining, things like that, where you can plan on a smaller timescale, sometimes it really blows out. And we'll try and make that go faster, but the quicker you dry timber, the more volatile it'll be in that process and could go to shit. Yeah, timber that you dry too quickly does not like it. Is there another one over here?
I have a question. So when you salvage timber that's fallen down, you talk about yarrow ranges, we've got a whole lot of like enormous yellow box that are down and peppermints. Is that viable for anything other than?
I'd be very keen on the yellow box. Yellow box
Because
class 1
you don't
durability, I'm pretty
really
sure.
want it to go to firewood.
No,
But
that
we
would-
want it cleared off our land so that we've got
Yeah.
grazing.
So logistics of salvage is really tricky.
Yeah.
The trees are not always planted for their timber, so you might end up with a yellow box that's like this. But if that's a high durability timber, I want to know about it. That's the one thing is what I'm looking for. It's in a slide coming up. Is please can I have some high durability timber planted? I want stuff that's class 1 durability, so then it can go into high durability cladding, decking, things that will last a long time. Will meet Bell ratings, and I imagine climate change is going to change. I think, if there's more and more bushfires happening, it's going to become a bare minimum to have. It's called Bell 29, which is bushfire attack level, where it's durable enough to handle ember attack and not set fire to your house. So things like sugar gum, ironbark, really tough, dense timbers. They take a long time to grow, but the end result is like gold to us.
But also, in more and more timbers being used in even high-rise buildings, there's now a new preference, which is good for people growing.
Yeah, exactly.
When you say class 1, do you mean like hardwoods?
Well, hardwoods are, there's such a spectrum because balsa wood is technically a hardwood. Durability class is it's on a 1 to 4 scale. Class 1 durability meaning it has a certain time frame of viability use above ground and a certain below ground. So it'll have class 1 above, class 2 below, which generally means, I don't know what the years are, but if it's class 1 below ground, I think it's got a lifespan of 25 years and above. Class 3 below ground would be like 2.5 to 5 years. So it's about how durable, how dense. There's a few factors that go into it. It can be chemical durability as well, like American sequoia. It's a very soft, light wood, but it's very high durability chemically. So it can be put in the ground and it just won't rot. But all of that information is on Wood Solutions. I'll just quickly go through. So our supply chain, we've talked about this. It's coming from sawmillers, salvage, forestry management group as well. Like there's a group called Wood for Good. Ben Boxall, I think he's part of the Master TreeGrowers organisation as well. They plant forests on derelict farmland or barren farmland. They get contracted to make it a forest, and part of that process is thinnings. So they've been planting a lot of very durable timbers in central Victoria. Some of the product that we get off them is sugar gum firewood. So that's essentially a waste material for them because they're cutting them down too young to be used as a building material. And then that goes back into their system, that money. In-house processes we've already talked about. Timber selection criteria. So that's what I'll ask. Anytime someone says, I've got some trees, my question is, why do you have? Why have these trees come down? Tell us more about it. That was the one thing I wanted to talk about, high durability timbers. I don't need it to be everything that I have, but I have a demand for it. So if I don't have a decking option, I'm in trouble. So
if you're looking for sugar gum for these purposes, what sort of DBH are you looking at?
I don't know. I can't have the sapwood sugar gum. The borer loves it.
Yep.
I'd be very happy with a board that's 100 mil by 25 mil rough sawn. So if you're cutting it green, if you want to talk sawmilling, if you get 100 by 25 mil sawn board out of it, and there's no sapwood in that, I'm happy.
Okay.
And then quality furniture timbers, which is what I imagine is going to be the faster growing messmate, shiny gum, southern blue gum, blackwood, things like that. People come to us day after day for that as well. What else have we got? Supply challenges. We get people come to us with poorly managed plantations, and that's why you're doing this course, is so you know how to do it well. They planted hectares with thousands and thousands of trees, and they just put them in and left them alone, and came back to me 30 years later. I wasn't part of it at the start, but saying, all right, we're ready to harvest, and we're like, yeah, but none of that's good. We can't use any of it. And that would be absolutely devastating. If they pruned, if they thinned, if they managed it, then the end result is just worlds apart. Logistics, yeah, that's mainly about salvage. If a tree's fallen down in the middle of a forest, how do you get to it? Not going to worry so much about that. Milling. My offsider, Pete, he was saying that his experience talking to farm foresters, they might have small lots, they might have big lots of trees that are available. One sawmiller might be happy to deal with a day's work, so a couple of logs, but they might also say, no, I'll only set up my machinery if you're going to give me this many logs, and it might be thousands of tons worth of timber. So finding, like, if we're talking 20 years in the future, then you'll have a lot of time to do this legwork, and maybe even set up your own group where we share a unit. That may be not a problem. That, at the moment, we're having trouble finding sawmillers that will do small lots. This is essentially for your reference later. Once you get sent the link, you can get me at that phone number or that email address, and that website will have more information about who we are, what we do. That's some beautiful southern blue gum from our farm forested timber, which I just love. And then this is a bit of a look down from, like, we had, to begin with, when I started with the business, there was maybe that much, just those 3 stacks. And now this is one half of the warehouse. There's a whole section over here which is also chock-a-block. So this happened in the space of about a year and a half, going from that much to this. So there's a demand for it. Yeah, now I was going to throw out to questions, but I feel like we've been chipping away at that.
I have one. Just about salvage timber. Is there a time frame for when it becomes not viable from when it's fallen down?
Great question. I have it's contentious level crossing removal projects in town. Trees come down, the public does not like it. It kind of has to happen, and the way that they get around it is they say that they're going to reuse those trees in projects on the site. So they're at least going to do something with what they're pulling out. We've had some challenges where I've been sent an arborist report which has all the species, all the DBH. I go through looking at all the photos, thinking which ones are going to make saw logs, which ones won't, and I say I'll have 18, I'll have 37, I'll have this one, this one, this one. They cut them down, and then I don't hear from them for months. And this happened. There was just like an amazing silky oak, and quite a barrel on it. And I get sent a photo, I think about 6 months later, saying, the log's here, when do you want to come pick it up? And it was just destroyed. Like, the thing was falling apart. There was end split going all the way through it. It had just deteriorated so much. It's firewood. It's not, I wouldn't even use it as firewood, it's mulch. And yeah, so if you're doing salvage and you can pull the log out, you can end seal the log, so it stops moisture being released too quickly through the end grain, because that's where the timber wants to release the moisture. You'll slow that process of it drying naturally, giving you more time to then organise yourself, get it sawn, so then it can dry evenly in stick, and you get a good end result. Something that's more predictable in how it's going to behave. Yeah, end sealing logs. You can just go and get wax. You can use cheap house paint. People use all kinds of different things. If you want to keep the outside dry for pest control, you've seen sawmills with sprinklers on, spraying their timber. It's to keep the moisture up. So Lictus borer or longer column beetle don't get in there and start eating the sapwood away and destroying that part of the timber before they have a chance to saw it. Does that make sense? Yeah, so keeping it wet before you do something to it is actually a good thing.
The ASAP is really the, but you want it as soon as you can get it after it's come down.
Yeah, unless you can store it, but do those processes. It might just be you paint the ends. But talk to a portable sawmiller, talk to us, talk to people that do this. Like I've not found a timber person yet that wasn't happy to have a chat.
I think to myself, what a wonderful